When my CEO wife found out that I had voluntarily handed over a multi-million-dollar project to her favorite little assistant, she thought that her 3-month-long Cold War with me had finally worked. She was all smiles and cheerfully suggested we go on a honeymoon to Iceland. But when the assistant, Jack, found out, he became jealous and threw a tantrum, threatening to quit the company. Emily, who had always spoiled him, panicked. After coaxing him for 3 days and nights, she canceled the honeymoon again under the excuse of a business trip and gave the other honeymoon ticket to him. Later, she casually explained it to me. Romantic feelings are just trivial things. Work should always come first. As the boss, I must prioritize work above all else. You're my husband, you should understand, right? I looked at my phone, where Jack had just posted a new status, a couple photo of the two of them, their heads touching as they made a heart shape with their hands. I said nothing, just nodded. Emily thought I'd become more generous and mature. She was very pleased with herself and promised to make it up to me with an even more romantic honeymoon once we got back. But what she didn't know was, I had already submitted my resignation, and she had already signed the divorce papers. There is no future for her and me anymore. Chapter 1. The day after Emily and her little assistant Jack went on their honeymoon, I finished all my work handovers and went through the resignation process with HR. Not even 10 minutes later, I got a notification, resignation approved, Emily. Looks like the CEO's been wanting to get rid of him for a while. At least he had the self-awareness to leave on his own. Yeah, I mean, staying here would only make things more awkward for the CEO. It's better he left early. I just wonder what he plans to do now. Why should we minimum wage nobody's care? After all, he's Emily's husband. Even if he quits and does nothing, he probably still has money to burn. As I packed up my things, my co-workers watched me with jealous, mocking eyes. I was used to it. Everyone knew Jack and I didn't get along. And even though Emily was my wife, she openly favored Jack and often humiliated me in front of others for his sake. Because of this, they all rushed to make things harder for me, trying to curry favor with her precious assistant. Thinking of that, I let out a cold laugh. Sorry to disappoint, but I'm switching jobs. A new company offered me double the salary and much better benefits. I didn't bother looking at their envy-twisted faces as I carried my belongings out of the office. But just as I stepped outside, I got a call from Emily. I was just thinking about how I'd explain my resignation, only for her to say, "I've sent you a document. Get it done and send it back to me within an hour." So she still didn't know I'd quit. I couldn't help but chuckle as I opened the file. It was the same project I'd recently handed over to Jack. Just like always, Jack got the credit and fame. I did the work. If anything went wrong, I took the blame. At first, I refused. But Emily kept persuading me in every way she could. When I wouldn't budge, she gave me the silent treatment and stayed up all night working on it herself. I couldn't bear to see her struggle, so I gave in. I used to believe that one day, she'd understand how much I cared. But this time, she had fought with me for Jack's promotion, giving me the cold shoulder for 3 full months. Even when I had a 104 degrees Fahrenheit fever and was hospitalized, she didn't come to see me, not even once, just so she could force me to hand over a $1 million project I'd spent a whole month working on. That was when I finally gave up. "I'm not at the office," I replied calmly. "Not at the office." Emily's voice suddenly turned cold. "I believe it's work hours right now, Oscar. If you're absent without leave during work hours, that's a full day's pay docked according to company policy." "I know, but I already." Just as I was about to tell her I'd resigned, I heard Jack's gentle voice in the background. "Emily, if Oscar doesn't want to do it, don't force him. I'll handle it." "No, you worked too hard yesterday. You need to rest today." Emily's tone was soft and affectionate, completely different from the way she'd just spoken to me. Jack was still trying to explain that he wasn't tired, but Emily cut him off, her tone firm. "I'm the boss. When I tell you to rest, it's an order. You dare disobey me?" Jack stuck out his tongue playfully. "I just think it's too hard on Oscar, as if he has it harder than you. You're traveling for business and still managing contracts, while he does nothing all day at the office. Besides, he's my husband. Isn't it his duty to work hard for me?" Emily sneered. With a single sentence, she wiped away everything I had done. I no longer felt anger, jealousy, or heartbreak, just numbness. After all, this wasn't the first time. Seeing my silence, Emily assumed I had agreed and softened her tone a little. "Oscar, do you really think all I give you is just work? I'm trying to train you as my husband. You should have more responsibility and drive for the company. You should learn from Jack. He worked until 4 a.m. yesterday. I've never seen anyone so talented, so young, and so hardworking." Jack laughed beside her. "I think Oscar's great too." But despite the words, there was a hint of contempt in his voice. Emily didn't catch it and scoffed lightly. "If he were even half as good as you, I'd be smiling in my sleep. Don't forget, all the projects this year were done by you. The two of them were perfectly in sync." I stayed quiet. I didn't feel like arguing. All the projects this year were ones Jack had taken from me. Emily knew it too, but pretended not to. She probably figured that after 5 years of marriage, I wouldn't divorce her over something so trivial. Anyway, Jack and I have an event to attend later. Finish the file and send it over soon. Before I could say a word, Emily hung up, but barely 2 minutes passed before my phone buzzed again, twice. Jack had posted a new status update. The two of them were sitting at a lavish candlelit dinner. Emily was leaning her head coyly on Jack's shoulder, and in front of Jack was an elegant little gift box, just the right size to hold a ring. I scrolled down a bit further and saw another update Jack had posted last night. At 4 a.m., he and Emily were partying at a bar, laughing with drinks in hand. So this was the hard work Emily spoke of, and the event they had to attend tonight was just another date. I let out a quiet laugh, not even interested in confronting Emily anymore. What would be the point? She always had some excuse ready, even when I left her speechless. What followed was never an apology or any real remorse, only another long, punishing silence. And I was always the one who had to make peace in the end. Thinking about it now, all that time I spent trying to fix things, I should have spent it trying to make more money, because love fades, but money never betrays you. With that thought, I walked out of the company for good, already planning my next steps. But just as I pulled out of the parking garage, my phone buzzed twice. It was a payment notification. Emily had just spent another $20,000 using my credit card. Chapter 2. Everyone thought I was with Emily for her money, but in truth, all my bank cards were in her hands. She claimed her own money had to be used for the company. So all these years, our living expenses came out of my salary and the income from my side gigs. I always believed that a man should contribute more to the household, so I never argued with her about it, until recently, when I realized that despite earning a high income, I had no savings. In fact, I was constantly strapped for cash. I couldn't take it anymore and went through my billing statements. That's when I discovered Emily often used my card to buy gifts for Jack. She had bought him game consoles worth thousands, designer suits that cost over 10 grand, and even booked an entire 5-star hotel to celebrate his birthday, spending over 100,000. And yet for me, she couldn't even be bothered to buy me new underwear after I wore the same ones for 2 months. If a gift cost more than $100, she'd complain it was too expensive and hand me a handwritten card instead, saying we should save for our future. I finally couldn't hold it in and confronted her about it. Emily's face turned cold. She accused me of not trusting her, gave me the silent treatment, and swore she'd never spend another cent of my money again. Thinking about all that, I still dialed her number. I called over 10 times. No answer. So I didn't hesitate any longer. I went straight to the bank and froze the card. Less than a minute later, Emily called me back. Sorry, I was busy and didn't see your calls. What's up? She tried to sound innocent. I replied calmly. Nothing. It's been handled. Oh, by the way, your card seems to be having an issue. It's frozen, she said casually. I know. I said plainly. I did it. Why the hell would you do that for no reason? Got too much time on your hands. Let's just say I did. But didn't you say you wouldn't use my card anymore anyway? Emily froze. I had never cared about money when it came to her. Back when the company had just started, I fell seriously ill. The surgery cost $100,000, but she had secretly invested all our savings into a project and lost it all. She thought I'd be furious and came to me crying, ready to apologize. But instead, I comforted her, told her money was no big deal, that my earnings were hers to use first. I thought giving her my heart would make our relationship stronger. I never expected it would only make her feel entitled to more. But Emily didn't seem to reflect on any of that. After 2 seconds of silence, she sighed. All right, I get it. You're still mad I didn't go on the honeymoon with you, so you're being petty. Oscar, I really thought you'd matured, but you're still so childish. Fine. After this, I promise I'll drop everything and go on that honeymoon with you. Okay. I didn't bring my card with me this time. Just go unfreeze yours and stop being difficult. Tonight's event is really important. You've got 10 minutes, or I'm going to be seriously pissed. She threw in that threat just before hanging up, as if afraid I might say no. In the past, every time she said she was mad, I'd obediently do whatever she asked. Not because I feared her anger, but because I knew how hard she worked and didn't want to add to her stress. Only now did I finally realize, no matter how much I tried to ease her burdens, the things she complained about were always of her own making. So why should I keep cleaning up her mess? If you didn't bring your card, ask your secretary or Jack. This business trip is for his project anyway. Letting him cover the bill doesn't seem unreasonable. After sending that message, I turned off my phone, got in the car, and drove home to pack. The apartment was fully paid for by me, a layout and floor she liked. At the time, I'd thought about putting both our names on the deed, but something told me not to, so I ended up putting it under my name alone. Looking back now, I'm glad I had left myself a way out. After packing up my things, I listed the apartment with a real estate agent. The next day, I went to the Civil Affairs Bureau and handed over the signed divorce agreement. Back when we first signed it, I had still been wondering how I was going to explain it to Emily. But she had been in such a hurry to grab her luggage and head downstairs that she didn't even glance at the document, just flipped to the last page and signed her name. At least read it once, I'd said, still holding on to a sliver of hope. No need. You're my husband. Why wouldn't I trust you? I gave a bitter smile. She had trusted Jack more than she ever trusted me. That so-called trust was just an excuse to brush me off. She was in a rush to catch her flight and eager to spend time with Jack on their honeymoon. In a way, it saved me the trouble of talking her into it. But when I handed in the documents, the clerk told me that they still needed personal confirmation of emotional breakdown from both parties before processing the divorce. I pulled out photos of Emily and Jack being overly affectionate, then showed the ruined wedding photo she had smashed in a fit of rage over Jack. The clerk still shook their head. We need her to say it herself. No exceptions. Frustrated, I turned my phone back on. The moment it powered up, dozens of missed calls and unread messages from Emily popped up. Because I hadn't unfrozen the bank card, she had gone from coaxing to threatening, ending with a furious rant. The last message was her swearing at me and saying she wanted a divorce. I showed the texts to the clerk. Still, they shook their head. I had no choice but to call her. It rang for a long time before she finally picked up. Emily, about our relationship. What relationship? I don't want to hear anything from you. I'm divorcing you. And that's final. She thought I was trying to patch things up again and cut me off coldly before hanging up. The clerk, finally convinced, looked at me with a touch of sympathy and submitted the documents. They told me the divorce certificate would be ready in a month. I knew Emily didn't really mean it when she said she wanted a divorce. It was just a threat. Whenever she was mad at me, she'd pull that line. And every time, I'd cave. I'd apologize, give in to all her demands, and beg her not to leave. She knew I didn't want a divorce, and that became her ultimate weapon. She thought threatening me with it would get her anything she wanted. But she forgot one thing. Love is like a savings account. You can't keep withdrawing without depositing. Eventually, it runs dry. Because I had listed the apartment at a low price, it sold within a week. I went to the real estate office, signed the contract, confirmed the handover date with the buyer, and then returned home. But the moment I opened the door, I was greeted by laughter and cheerful voices from inside. The matching slippers at the entrance were gone. In their place was a pair of men's leather shoes and Emily's favorite high heels, the ones Jack had gifted her on her birthday. That's when it hit me. The people inside were Emily and Jack, but weren't they supposed to be back 2 days later? Just as I was trying to piece it together, Jack walked out. Having heard the door, he was wearing my slippers, wearing my bathrobe, strolling around like he owned the place. Oscar, what are you doing back so early? I thought your company doesn't get off work at this time. As he spoke, he flicked ash into a nearby glass. A glass I recognized. It was one of the matching mugs Emily had gifted me. I used to cherish it, used to hold it gently like it was something precious. Chapter 3. At that moment, Emily walked out from the living room. She saw Jack using my mug as an ashtray, and pretended not to see it. The same woman who used to gag at the smell of smoke, who had strictly ordered me to quit smoking, now showed not even the slightest discomfort. Clearly, she had changed a lot while being with Jack. When she saw me, her expression flickered. For a split second, it was complicated, but it quickly turned cold. Skipping work again. Oscar, just because you're my husband doesn't mean you can do this all the time. The office is a company, not our home. If you don't follow the rules, how can I expect anyone else to? Rules? I nearly laughed out loud. If anyone had a habit of breaking the rules, it was her, Emily. A year ago, when the company had just stabilized, Emily broke all protocol to parachute Jack, who had zero industry experience, straight into a management position. I had my doubts, of course, but when Emily told me Jack had great potential, I decided to give him the benefit of the doubt and mentored him personally. But Jack did nothing but play games and sleep. During work hours, he dragged his feet. Then he'd stay until late at night and post photos in the company group chat to pretend he was working overtime. I reported it to Emily. She shrugged it off and said maybe Jack was just trying to unwind after a tough day. I asked her to keep an eye on him. She said she didn't have time. I suggested installing cameras. She claimed it was illegal. Later, project after project failed under his hand, costing us millions. Jack still did whatever he wanted. When I finally had enough and tried to fire him, Emily fought me on it. And then she asked me, "Are you just jealous? Afraid Jack's too good and might outshine you?" So Jack stayed, and one by one, he poached my clients, hijacked my projects. Emily saw it all, but she turned a blind eye, and even praised him as a top-performing employee, painting me as the jealous, insecure one. Back then, I felt wronged, but now, looking back, if I had that kind of tolerance in any other company, I'd probably be a success story instead of this mess. I said nothing. Jack gently patted Emily's back, coaxing her in a soft voice. Maybe Oscar rushed over because he heard you were back in the country. Emily clearly bought it. Her expression brightened with pride. Fine. Just don't let it happen again. But how did you even know I was back today? Jack smiled. Emily, you forgot. HR booked the return flight. Maybe she told Oscar. Emily snorted. You always have time for office gossip. Huh. Oscar, maybe try focusing on your actual work for once. And don't think I'm going to forgive you just because you came running back like this. You froze the card and made me look like a fool in front of our business partners. In the end, it was Jack who went around begging for money to settle the bill. Seeing I didn't respond, Emily assumed I was reflecting like I always did. Her tone softened slightly. It's not that I can't forgive you, but first, we need to properly compensate Jack. The place he's staying is under renovation. It's unlivable for now. Just clear out the bedroom here and let him stay for a while. If you do that, I won't hold anything else against you. I shook my head. This apartment's already sold. Sold. Emily's eyes widened. Before she could ask, Jack jumped in. Oscar probably sold it to buy a bigger place to make it up to you, right? Emily found that explanation quite convincing, and instantly beamed. That actually makes sense. We have lived here long enough. It's time to upgrade. I'll pitch in for the new place, too. So don't sell this one just yet. Jack can use it in the meantime. Oh no, that's too much. I'll pay rent. Market price. What rent? Emily's face darkened. I'm your boss. I won't let you pay rent. Still, it just doesn't feel right. No way, I insist. Fine. Then just a few $100 or something. The two of them went back and forth like a comedy skit. Emily put on an air of generosity, pretending like rent was no big deal. This apartment was in the city center. Renting it out at market rate would go for nearly $10,000 a month. Of course, Emily acted like it was nothing. But back when we were dating, she used to split the bill with me down to the last cent, for dinner, for movie tickets, everything. The difference between love and indifference is truly worlds apart. So, if you agree, I might reconsider the divorce. No need to reconsider. What? You think I'd just forgive you that easily? She cut me off, thinking I was trying to win her back. If I don't teach you a lesson, how do I know you won't mess up again? Jack chuckled beside her. Emily's got a point. But come on. For my sake, maybe let Oscar off the hook this time. Besides, you and Oscar have been married for so many years. Wouldn't it be a shame to throw it all away? Emily pretended to ponder seriously. Jack went a step further, gently tugging her arm, coaxing her like a child. Emily said, "Stop it," but her face was blooming with a smile. All right then. She finally turned to me, looking pleased. Since Jack spoke up for you, I'll forgive you this time. You should really thank him. After everything you did to him, he's still willing to put in a good word. So, about the divorce, you misunderstood. I interrupted her flatly before she could finish, and held the divorce agreement out to her. What I meant was, we're already divorced. Chapter 4. Emily's smile froze at the corners of her lips. What do you mean? You want to divorce me? Her expression wasn't as joyful as I had once imagined. Unexpectedly, there was even a hint of anger. Jack was stunned for just a moment, a flicker of joy flashing quickly in his eyes, but his tone pretended to be reproachful. Oscar, why are you so stubborn? Emily only brought up divorce just now because she wanted you to coax her, not because she really wanted to leave you. Hurry and take that divorce agreement back. Don't be ridiculous. Emily's been working so hard for so long, and she finally made it back to the country. Don't upset her. It sounded like he was speaking on my behalf, but I knew very well he was deliberately provoking Emily. He'd used this tactic many times before, and it always worked. Emily had once demoted me out of spite and even withheld 2 months of my salary out of anger. I thought she would once again impulsively accept the idea of divorce, but to my surprise, she remained calm, her face serious. After a long pause, she said, I'm not going to divorce you, Oscar. There are too many shared interests between us now. Hearing that, I finally understood what was bothering her. It was about the division of assets. But it seemed she had forgotten that before we got married, she had requested a prenuptial agreement. It clearly stated that if we divorced, I wouldn't get a cent of her wealth. Likewise, she wouldn't be entitled to any of my premarital assets either. I interrupted her flatly and reminded her of that arrangement. And maybe you misunderstood. I meant that we're already divorced. You signed this agreement a long time ago. Emily froze, then immediately denied it. That's impossible. I don't remember that at all. Seeing that she was still in denial, I flipped to the last page. Her signature was scrawled at the bottom, messy but unmistakably hers. Maybe the sight of it jogged her memory. Her face slowly turned pale. The papers you gave me before were for divorce. She stared at me in shock, her eyes wide. I nodded, and watched as her expression darkened further. But wasn't she the one who'd been so fixated on divorce? Why was she acting like this now? I couldn't believe she had never thought seriously about ending our marriage. Time ticked by slowly. I thought she might seize this chance to go along with it. But just a few minutes later, She suddenly snatched the papers and violently tore them to pieces. "I'm not divorcing you." Her tone was firm. Her reaction confused me, but I also found it a little funny. Tearing it up won't change anything. The paperwork's already been processed at the Civil Affairs Bureau. The divorce certificate will be issued soon. Hearing that the divorce was almost finalized, Jack's smile grew even brighter, but he feigned regret and said, Oscar, why are you being so impulsive with what you're doing? I really feel bad for Emily. If I had a girlfriend as great as her, I'd never want a divorce." "Shut up." Before Jack could finish, Emily did something unprecedented. She cut him off harshly and furiously. Chapter 5. Jack stood frozen on the spot. His face was filled with shock, as if he simply couldn't believe what had just happened. Understandable. Emily had always spoken to Jack in soft tones, never a harsh word, always afraid of upsetting him. Her sudden hostility even took me by surprise. Realizing perhaps that she'd gone too far, Emily composed herself and addressed Jack with a cooler, more even tone. "This is between the two of us. It's not your place to interfere. If you're fine, you should leave now." But Jack refused. "Emily, have you forgotten? The apartment I rented isn't livable right now. If it's not livable, go to a hotel. You're a grown man. Don't tell me you can't solve your own problems. Or are you expecting me to conjure up an apartment out of thin air for you?" Her tone was ice cold, but I noticed she shot Jack a quick, subtle glance. She probably thought she was being discreet, but what she didn't know was that I had already found out. She had secretly bought a small house in the suburbs, hiding it from me. Clearly, Jack understood her signal. With a pouty, falsely aggrieved look, he quietly fished a key out of the coat pocket hanging on the rack, Emily's coat, and slipped out the door. I didn't expose their little secret. After all, I no longer cared about them. Besides, exposing them would change nothing. On paper, that property was Emily's. Who she gave it to was entirely her choice. After he left, Emily let out a sigh. When she looked back at me, her voice had softened significantly. "Now are you finally satisfied? I know you didn't really want a divorce. You were just angry that I was too close to Jack. But there's nothing between me and him. I just felt bad that he was all alone in this city. As his boss, I thought I should help him out. I admit that being close to him might have provoked you a little. But no matter what, we're the married couple. I did it because I wanted you to become better." She smiled as she walked over and stretched out her arms, trying to hug me. I didn't hesitate. I pushed her away. "The handover for the apartment is in a month. I want to use this time to clean it up properly. Since you're back now, figure out how to move your things yourself." Her arms froze midair. The smile on her lips stiffened. "Oscar, what do you mean? I've already told Jack to leave. I've said everything I could, and you still want to sell the house, still want a divorce." She looked as if she had suffered a huge injustice. But when we were in the middle of our Cold War, in order to keep her from leaving, I had even been forced to kneel before her in public. I said nothing. Emily seemed to take my silence as hesitation. She sighed, then continued, "Even if you divorce me now, have you thought about what comes next? I admit I'm not perfect, but have you considered the possibility that your next partner might not even be as good as me? What will you do then?" I nearly laughed. In her eyes, was love and marriage a matter of profit and loss? I could understand that mindset from her as a businesswoman, but if that was how she thought, I just couldn't figure out, in her calculations, what exactly made Jack the better choice over me. Still, I didn't say it aloud. There was no point in discussing it anymore. Just as I was about to speak, her phone rang. It was a call from the company. "President, our partner just called. They said there's a major issue with the project Jack's assistant handled. They're furious and demanding we fix it immediately, or they'll take us to court." Chapter 6. How is that possible? Jack's proposals have always been solid. How could this one? She trailed off mid-sentence, falling abruptly silent. After vaguely instructing the person on the other end to stabilize the situation, she hung up and looked up at me. "Oscar, didn't you check that proposal?" Looks like it was coming back to her. Previously, after Emily snatched the project from me and tossed it to Jack, I'd always felt uneasy. Every time, I would quietly fix Jack's error-ridden drafts until the final version was barely presentable. But every time, Emily would laugh and chide me for meddling, insisting that Jack could handle things on his own. And whenever something went wrong, she'd turn around and blame me for not reviewing things carefully enough, scolding me for missing such obvious mistakes. So this time, I didn't even look at it. She said Jack could handle it himself, so I gave him the chance to prove it. "No, I didn't," I replied, shaking my head. Emily's brow furrowed deeply. Just as she looked like she was about to erupt, I said calmly, "This was Jack's assignment, not mine. I had neither the authority nor the obligation to interfere. But you're my husband, so what?" I let out a cold laugh. "Because I'm your husband, I'm supposed to clean up every mess for you, take your scolding, endure your silent treatment, let everyone mock and belittle me while you stand by and do nothing. I've tolerated you all this time, done everything a husband should. But you, have you done anything that makes you worthy of being called a wife? How have I not?" Emily shot back. Oh, was it when you flirted with another man? Or when you teamed up with him to take away my project? Are those your examples of being a good wife? My tone was sharp. I didn't hold back. It was a side of me Emily had never seen before. She seemed stunned, frozen for a moment, unable to come up with a retort. She bit her lip, as if something were on the tip of her tongue, but she held back. Several minutes passed before she straightened her posture and put back on the authoritative demeanor she wore at the office. I don't want to argue about these pointless things. Whether or not I'm a qualified wife is irrelevant. I'm still your boss. This project is a company issue, and as my employee, it's your responsibility. You'll handle the situation within 3 days. Otherwise, she pulled out her phone, opening the company's management system. She started searching for my name to forward the project file, but after 2 minutes of searching, she still couldn't find me. Her face darkened. Finally, she looked up at me, wide-eyed. Where are you? Why can't I find you in the company database? I couldn't help but laugh. Did you forget? I already quit. Chapter 7. You were the one who approved it at the time. That's impossible. I don't remember ever allowing you to resign. Emily's expression gradually shifted from disbelief to panic. She immediately began searching for the resignation request. I watched her calmly, unsurprised, only amused. What could she possibly remember? Aside from worrying about whether Jack had a place to stay, whether he was eating well, whether he was getting enough rest, she remembered nothing about anyone else. She didn't remember my resignation, didn't remember the pain of being discarded by her, certainly didn't remember how hard I'd fought for a single project. She wasn't panicking because I left, she was panicking because now no one was left to clean up the mess. Once this crisis passed, she'd go back to her old self, flirting with Jack, helping him steal my projects, letting everyone continue mocking and isolating me. Finally, she found the record. When she saw my name listed as the applicant, her eyes went wide. She stumbled back 2 steps, and cursed under her breath. Who the hell approved this? Don't they know you're my husband? Emily flew into a rage and immediately called the company. Someone picked up quickly. Before they could say anything, Emily unleashed a barrage of curses. Did you confirm this with me? Who told you to act on your own? But Emily, didn't you say? Say what? Did I say to fire him? He's my husband. Don't you know that? What kind of idiot are you? Can't even tell who your real boss is. Get the hell out of the company. I better never see your face again. After she'd finished chewing the person out, Emily turned back to me with a suddenly sweet and apologetic look. Oscar, I had no idea she would treat you like that. Come back, please? She looked like she was standing up for me, but if it weren't for her and Jack's behind-the-scenes encouragement, would anyone have dared treat me that way in the first place? Sure, those co-workers had bullied me, but the people whispering behind their backs, giving them permission, giving them cover, weren't they Emily and Jack? Seeing I didn't respond, Emily pulled out her phone again and started offering me a high salary, trying to rehire me on the spot. I brushed her hand away. You'd better focus on dealing with your current crisis. I'm leaving. And don't forget to move your stuff out before the apartment handover. If there's a penalty fee, I will take you to court. And once legal trouble hits, there's bound to be turbulence in your company. Things will only get messier. So for your own sake, I suggest we end this civilly. After all, we were married for 5 years. I don't want this to get uglier than it already is. With that, I walked off without looking back, heading into the bedroom to pack my things. Maybe my words had finally hit her, because Emily didn't chase after me this time. After a few minutes, I heard her footsteps fading down the hallway. I didn't think too much about it. I finished packing and moved everything into the new place I had just rented. After resting for a couple of days, I started job hunting. I had quit without another offer lined up. My talk of jumping ship before resigning had been a bluff. But to my surprise, within 2 days of uploading my resume, a company offered me a position with double my previous salary and benefits far beyond anything I'd expected. I didn't hesitate. I aced the interview, signed the contract, and started the job immediately. In the meantime, the apartment handover went smoothly, and a large sum of money landed in my bank account. Life became peaceful. No more internal conflict, no more stress. I no longer had to get angry watching my wife chat with other men. No longer had to worry whether she'd give away my hard-earned projects to someone else again. After just a few days, I could even see the weight lifting off my face. I was looking healthier. But Emily clearly wasn't doing as well as I was. Chapter 8. After Jack revised the proposal 7 or 8 times, the client hadn't even exploded yet. Jack broke down first. The moment his final draft was rejected again, he snapped and smashed his computer in front of everyone at the office. By then, many employees had already started handing in their resignations. Emily was overwhelmed, trying to keep things together. Seeing Jack's outburst while in the middle of a crisis, she lost it, slapped him across the face on the spot. Infuriated, Jack stormed out of the company. No matter how many times Emily tried calling him afterward, he never picked up again. Emily then attempted to outsource the project, but the client found out. In the end, Emily violated the terms of the contract and was taken to court. The day she received the summons, she showed up at my place again. Thunder rumbled in the sky as rain poured down. She stood outside in the storm, screaming and sobbing, apologizing over and over, begging me for another chance. She swore she'd never make the same mistakes again. I pulled the curtains closed, slipped in earplugs, and laid down on my soft, warm bed. Not even a flicker of sympathy stirred in me. It was just a rainstorm for her, but for me, our 5-year marriage had been one long, unending downpour. I thought she would eventually give up and leave on her own if I didn't show up. But to my surprise, even by the time the sun came up the next morning, Emily was still standing outside the courtyard. The rain had soaked her hair, plastering it to her pale, colorless face. I had never seen her so pitiful. I hadn't planned to see her, but I had work to get to. Just as I expected, the moment I stepped out the door, Emily rushed over, eyes wide with pleading sorrow. "You don't need to look at me like that. I'm not going to help you." My tone was cold and final. "I know you're angry at me," she said. "I've thought things through over the past night. I won't ask you to help me anymore, but could you at least give me one last chance? Do you remember this?" As she spoke, she held out her hand. Resting in the center of her palm was a tiny, chipped diamond ring. I paused, and my thoughts began to drift. Emily had loved me. Once. Back when we got married, we barely had any money between the two of us. We couldn't scrape together even 10,000 yuan. Other people's wedding rings were the size of pigeon eggs. The one I gave her was pitifully small by comparison. When we got married, we promised, no matter what hardships came, we'd stick together. You told me you'd love me forever. She saw the slight shift in my expression, and her eyes lit up with a faint, hopeful glow. "I've never betrayed you. Jack and I weren't what you imagined. I only felt sorry for him, being here all alone, but I never had feelings for him. Oscar. What I did, it wasn't unforgivable. Please, give me one more chance, will you?" She kept going. I reached out and picked up the ring, but before that glimmer of hope could fully light her face, her expression turned ghostly pale. Chapter 9. I held the ring out in front of her, showing her the inscription on the inside. What was once a smooth, blank inner band now had words engraved into it. 2 names, carefully etched. Emily Jack. Exactly as I expected. I let out a soft laugh. Emily opened her mouth, trying to explain, but I cut her off. "Maybe you didn't do anything unforgivable, but your heart has already turned away. His name is now woven into every moment of our lives. Maybe it's you subconsciously ordering the dishes he likes when you're with me. Or maybe it's you murmuring his name in your sleep. If I were to forgive you, I'd have to forgive every single memory of betrayal. I'd have to forgive the version of myself who broke down over and over because of the two of you. And you'd have to endure my suspicion, my doubt, again and again. Ask yourself honestly, Emily, can you really live with that?" Emily said nothing. She just stood there, frozen, her eyes red and filled with tears, but I knew, deep down, she already had her answer. "This is where it ends," I said quietly. Then I turned and walked away, without looking back. This time, Emily didn't come after me, but behind me. I could hear the sound of her sobbing, raw, gut-wrenching cries. In those cries were regret and despair, but I knew it wasn't regret over the choices she'd made. It was regret over facing the consequences. Even if she could do it all over again, I knew she would still walk the same path she did before. Unsurprisingly, Emily lost the lawsuit. The client demanded 3 times the original deposit in compensation, totaling nearly 1 million yuan. With insufficient working capital, Emily emptied all her savings. She sold everything valuable she owned. And still, she came up short by hundreds of thousands. Left with no other choice, she finally decided to sell the small house she had secretly bought before. Only then did she discover that the name on the property deed had already been changed. It now read, Jack. When the news got out, no one was surprised. Emily had trusted him completely. Transferring ownership of a house, that was nothing. "Emily, you said yourself that you were giving me this house, so I had the deed transferred. What's the problem?" When Emily found Jack, he was lying lazily on the couch, munching on freshly washed red grapes. Orange peels and half-eaten takeout containers cluttered the table beside him. He'd vanished for so long, completely unreachable, only to be hiding out here all this time. Emily was furious, nearly exploding with rage. "This house was not a gift. Get out. I don't want to see you again." "That's not up to you," Jack replied smugly, waving the property deed in front of her. "The name on the papers is mine." He was so pleased with himself, thinking he'd played the perfect move, that Emily was now powerless. But Emily just laughed coldly, turned around, and went straight to the police. After presenting proof that she had paid for the house, she not only reclaimed the property but also, without hesitation, filed a lawsuit against Jack. Unfortunately, years of indulging him had left her without enough solid evidence to demand real compensation. In the end, Jack was only detained for 15 days before being released, but the moment he got out, Jack, still fuming, went looking for Emily, and launched a live stream online, revealing all kinds of dirt on her. With his handsome face and twisted charisma, Jack quickly climbed the trending charts. Meanwhile, Emily was exposed for infidelity during her marriage. The scandal snowballed, her reputation tanked rapidly, and soon, she became utterly disgraced. Her business partners pulled out one after another. Within a month, the company's cash flow dried up, and the business went bankrupt. At the very end, Emily arranged to meet with Jack. No one knows what was said between them, but the argument escalated. In the end, both of them jumped into a river. Emily drowned. Jack was discovered and rescued in time, but his mind had snapped. He began wandering the streets, raving like a madman, claiming he was a billionaire. Sometimes violent, sometimes delusional. In the end, the police had no choice but to commit him to a psychiatric hospital. When I heard the news, I had just been promoted twice in my new company. I bought myself a new place nearby, and I had a new girlfriend, someone who didn't care about my past. On the day we were planning our honeymoon, she suddenly leaned in and asked me mysteriously, "What does a honeymoon mean to you?" I thought for a moment. To someone you love, it's priceless. To someone you don't, probably just outrageously expensive. How much is our honeymoon worth? I suppose only time can answer that. But no matter how battered or bruised my heart has been, I still believe in pure, perfect love.